when I was asked to do this program 4 years ago, this is what my brain looked like. I just had all jumbled thoughts and how do I put this together, and colors and seasons and perennials and all, trees, all the different types of plants. So this is what it ended up looking like. I've broken this down over every single month. Now, when I talk about a plant giving color in January or blooming in March, it doesn't mean that's the only time that they are going to give you color in your garden, because obviously some stretch over certain months. But when I talk about them being in this month, that's probably their main time blooming or of interest. So, okay, so let's get going. Oh, one other little plug. A lot of these plants I'm hoping you'll see on the Tarrant County Master Gardener Tour, which is going to be on October 7th. And Pam Brock in the back, she would love to sell you tickets to this tour. I've heard it's going to be amazing. So, all right, January. Possum Haw Holly. It does lose its leaves. It's a small ornamental tree, but it retains the berries, and the cedar waxwings will come in January, February, and just clean it out. Amazing little tree. Yopon holly looks just like the possum haw, but it's evergreen. It retains its leaves, but has the same kind of red berries, and the waxwings love this tree as well. Akuba will get some red berries on it, the female will in the winter time, and then in the rest of the year you've got the yellow speckled leaves on it. Nice shrub, about 4 feet tall and wide. I have done nothing to mine in 20 years. And the only caution is they do need complete shade. They will turn black if they get any sun on them. Coralberry, I took this at the Fort Worth Botanic Gardens. This shrub will grow about 3 feet. I think Doris Hill has some in her garden. Puts the berries on in the wintertime, and then it'll put leaves. It does form a sort of a thicket, they say, where it'll grow by underground rhizomes, but I haven't found it to be invasive. So do you, Doris? Do you find it to be invasive? No? Okay, good. All right, Mahonia. This is leatherleaf Mahonia. It gets the yellow blooms on it in January, and then it's followed up in March later on with these purple berries. There's another variety called Soft Caress that is not prickly like the leatherleaf, but I have found it not cold hardy here. It's supposed to be a zone 7, which we are, but if you have it in where it's getting north winds, it seems to desiccate and just, it comes from the root, but when you want an evergreen that's going to be 3 to 4 feet tall, you don't want to have to start over from the ground every year. So I have 1 out of probably 5 left in my garden in more of a protected space. So I had high hopes for this plant because I don't really like prickly plants, but it has not done well in our winters. So if you have a protected spot, maybe give that one a try. Okay, winter jasmine blooms in the winter and then puts its leaves on later. There's also primrose jasmine and Italian jasmine. They bloom later. Just up close of the blooms. Again, this is at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden. I don't have all of these plants in my garden, but if I don't, one of you does, because some of you are in my program, and also our botanical gardens have them. So, winter honeysuckle, I do have this plant. I got it from Edith Pewitt. Y'all remember Edith? Many, many, many years ago, I dug one of these out of her garden. And it's quite large, at least 5 feet tall and wide, and it gets the most fragrant, teeny tiny little blooms on it in January. Nandinas. I think nandinas are just indispensable in our gardens because they stay small, they provide such color in the wintertime. They do have to have winter sun, so make sure they have that. But they will grow in a good bit of shade as well, and it's nice to have the smaller varieties that don't spread for where you need a small plant, because we've all got those windows that are 1.5 feet off the ground in the front of our house, and what do we plant there? So this is a great shade for that, to add some color. Just another variety. I can't tell the difference. You put a Nana and a Firepower next to each other, you can't tell the difference, but they say Firepower has better winter color. I don't see it. Purple winter creeper is a ground cover. that turns purple in the winter. That's how they came up with that name. I have had some problems with scale on this, so any euonymus will attract scale, so you might have to treat for it. In February, white is a color. This was 2010. Ooh, you remember that? That was snowy winter. All right, one of the first blooming shrubs in February is this mellow yellow spirea. It's tiny, tiny little white blooms on it, and I love the lime green foliage on it. It'll grow about 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. Then flowering quince comes on the scene with the pretty red, and then they follow up with their leaves later, but look at that thorn. Can you see that thorn? I don't know how to make this work, but anyway, right in front of that petal, there's a big old thorn on that, so just know that. Forsythia, another very early blooming large shrub, puts its leaves on afterward, but has the very bright yellow blooms in the spring. It does grow quite large. It can get to be about 6 feet, but you can cut this back after it blooms and keep it smaller. Hellebores, these are a small little plant for your winter garden. It's just so fun to go out there in January when nothing else is going on and you have these blooms. So many new varieties of them. They're developing new ones because most hellebores, their blooms hang down. And they only grow about 1 foot tall, so you almost have to be on the ground looking at them. But they are developing new varieties where the blooms are upward. And one of my favorite varieties is a white bloomer that's called Molly's White, and the foliage is speckled or variegated. It's in the frost kiss variety, so it looks like it's been kissed by frost. It's really a neat variety. Daffodils, and here's a plug. We're selling daffodils, so if you need your bulbs, get those today. So they start coming, some of them start coming on the scene in February, and of course we have some a little bit later. But Carlton, and I think we're selling that one this year. This is a great variety. The one picture there was taken in Marge Carpenter's garden. She has a great display of daffodils. And Ice Follies is probably my favorite, with the white petals and then the yellow center. And Grand Primo, old-fashioned, old type of Tizetta. Tizetta daffodils, you know how the other daffodils have one cup that comes out? Tizetta varieties have probably 5 little cups that come off of the stem. And they are so fragrant. But this is one of the earliest blooming and a very large plant. So then we're getting into March. And the wildflowers start coming on the scene. So we've got bluebonnets, and of course A&M had to get in there and give us a maroon or pinky color. And then California poppies. Especially on the bluebonnets, don't give them nice cushy soil. They want to grow on the roadside. So if you make it really, really nice and put all that compost in there, they probably won't do that well for you. They just like crud. So that's when they do the best. So if you want to plant wildflowers, now's the time to be doing that. October more, when it cools down, when it stays consistently cooler. So then they will germinate over the winter and they'll bloom in the spring, and then you have to let them go through that ugly period to collect the seeds. If you pull them off when they're still green, then they won't mature, so be sure to do that. So the California poppies stay really short and they have this gray ferny foliage. Oh, another caution, when you plant your wildflowers, remember where you put them because their little seedlings look like weeds. So my neighbor one time helped me out by pulling my weeds. So then we have some other bulbs that come on the scene in March. Spanish bluebells. This will actually bloom in a little bit of shadier areas. I love to plant this near Texas Gold Columbine because you get the blue and the yellow at the same time. It's just a pretty, pretty combo. And then the summer snowflake or leucojum has that pretty little dainty white bloom, bell-shaped bloom that hangs down with the little green specks on the end. It's just really cool. A couple little teeny tiny bulbs, grape hyacinth, and then starflower. Put these along the edge of your garden because they might grow 6 inches, teeny tiny, but very prolific and cute little bloomers. And then the Golden Dawn is another, Falconet is another one of the Tizetta types. They're a Division 7 are some of the best daffodils for our area and extremely fragrant. Grow quite tall, at least 1.5 feet. And then the Tahiti is a double bloomer. And my new favorite is this tete-a-tete. It only grows 6 inches as well. It's just so cute. And you know how when the daffodils are done, you have to let the foliage go yellow, and we all have that love-hate relationship. We love them when they're blooming, and then we just want them to go away. So we have our gardens pretty again. But this, since the foliage is so short, only 6 inches, it's not so in your face when they're yellowing. So they can be hidden by some of the other plants around them. So, and minnow is another variety to look for. In fact, we are selling that on our bulb sale. So I want to get some of those this year. All right, we wish we could do this. And actually, Sharon Chan she's in the Colleyville Garden Club. Her garden was on tour one year, and she planted 9,000 tulips in her garden, and it looked like that. Spectacular. But they won't come back, y'all, so don't waste your money on tulips. And they have to be pre-chilled. You can pre-chill them. I mean, they need to be chilled at 45 degrees for 45 days. You can buy them from garden centers who will pre-chill them for you, but seems like a lot of trouble. We can grow species tulips here, so look for those. We do have some of those on our peppermint stick is one of them that we're selling this year. So a little bit smaller, not quite so in your face with color, but they're tulips and we can grow them. And they come back every year. Then a Chinese ground orchid. I know Pam Brock gave me my first one. I got some more online. Dainty little violet blooms on it. They have strap-like foliage. Not kind of like an iris, but kind of not. Wider than a liriope, but maybe the foliage is about 1 foot tall, and then the blooms come up above that. Really neat little plant. And then sweet violet will bloom very early as well. I would caution you not to get wood violet. I grew up in Wisconsin. Wood violets are the state flower of Wisconsin. I thought, how cool would it be to have this, my home state flower in my Texas garden? Not so cool. It took over. Sweet violet, Viola odorata, stays more in a clump. It's not going to spread everywhere, so don't be afraid of that. So then we've got bridal wreath spirea. I like the double blooming bridal wreath. It grows very large though, probably 5 to 6 feet tall and wide. Let it do its thing. Don't shear this plant. Just let it have that drapey flow to it. And then loropetalum, again, a very large shrub. Everyone tells me, well, they said it was dwarf, but it's going to be 6 feet tall and wide. I've seen them 9 feet tall and wide. So please don't put this in the front of your house underneath your window that's 1.5 feet off the ground, or you're going to have to prune it all the time. Be on the lookout, though, for this bacterial gall. I am saying it's the next rose rosette because it is becoming epidemic. It is spread by anything that wounds the trunk. So whether you're pruning it, even hail, anything that puts a wound on the trunk, the bacteria can come in. And then if we have a wet, rainy season, it dribbles on down the stems and it spreads everywhere. I've seen it on nursery stock, and I've just seen it epidemic. I have a client who had to remove 11 of them because once you get it, can't fix it. You can spray fungicides to try to prevent it, but once you get it, there's no fix because you have to cut back beyond where the gall is, and if it's already down at the base of the trunk, there's nothing you can do. So, all right, viburnums, evergreen, bloom in the early spring with these white little blooms. Spring bouquet is this variety, and then who's got the double file viburnum in here? We went to your garden on March 27th, and I didn't know what this shrub was, but it was beautiful because it looks like a hydrangea, but it's got these dark green, leathery type of leaf on it. But anyway, this is a really nice variety, quite large, but like again, the hydrangea-looking blooms on it, double file. I would love to try this in my garden. Maybe it was Lyndall, is she here? Yes, Lyndall's garden. Okay, so then red buds come on the scene, and our club does the red bud program for the 3rd graders in the area, and this was my neighbor's red bud tree. Their daughter got the red bud in the 3rd grade and grew up to be a nice little tree. So lots of different varieties. Oklahoma, I think, has the prettiest bloom. It's the deepest magenta color, and then, of course, the eastern red bud, and then Burgundy Hearts is a variety that I have. It's supposed to be a vast improvement, they say, over forest pansy. I don't see the vast improvement. It looks exactly the same to me. And then Rising Sun Redbud is the lime green variety. The tag says it's supposed to only grow 8 to 12 feet tall. Mine is pushing 20 feet. So, you know, it's Texas. Everything's bigger here, right? So they got it wrong on that tag. But anyway, those two varieties I would tell you put in afternoon shade because their leaves are so tender and they just need a little break from the afternoon sun. All right, Saucer Magnolia. I remember sneaking in this guy's front yard to get that picture because that was an amazing specimen. So a small ornamental tree puts the blooms on and the leaves come later as opposed to regular magnolias, which I just realized I don't have in this program. All right, Mexican plum. This is a great substitute for Bradford pears. Don't plant Bradford pears. Everybody's probably losing theirs about now. After 20 years, they split. But they have gorgeous spring blooms and fall color, but this is a much better plant. It's a native, and it will give you the same white blooms and pretty color in the fall. Shantung maple. This has the tiny little yellow blooms on it in the spring. This is such a great little tree where you can't handle a big red oak that's going to be 60 feet tall and wide. You can put a shantung that's going to top out at 30 to 35 feet. Oops. Thought I had, oh, maybe it's later. There's a different variety. There's one called Fire Dragon, and then there's the regular shantung. I'm going to get to their fall color later on in the program. So, and then Texas Mountain Laurel might have a little bit of cold, tender issues here, maybe not. Some years the blooms may get frozen back, but they say they smell like grape Kool-Aid. So if you get a year that they bloom for you, they're just spectacular. I think they're a little bit more for the hill country. Then vines, Carolina jessamine, evergreen, blooms profusely, yellow blooms, quite large, probably grow 30 feet. And then cross vines, probably my personal favorite, again, evergreen. This one's called Tangerine Beauty because the color is orange. But it's not a trumpet vine. Do not plant trumpet vines. They will take over the world. All right, perennials, Georgia Blue Veronica, Oxeye Daisy, Four-Nerve Daisy, Phlox subulata, the creeping phlox, all come on very early in the spring. Four-Nerve Daisy will bloom almost 12 months out of the year. Amazing little plant and very drought tolerant. Then oxalis for your shady areas. Oxalis, like the purple one, actually any oxalis, it'll kind of go semi-dormant in the summertime. If it looks crummy, mine tend to get spider mites. I literally just rip the tops off, leave the little corms in the ground, and then it just comes right back. So, April. This is not Texas. I went to Wisconsin in April for my mom's 90th birthday, and we had 20 inches of snow, and they were saying this. And that's what it felt like. So, but I came back to this, so that's why I'm in Texas, right? So we have this kind of in April. All right, so salvias, you're going to hear me say salvias every single month, I think, except maybe December. But this is one of the first bloomers, May night, only grows about a foot and a half tall with the bloom spikes on it, blooms profusely in May, but it will bloom all summer long if you just keep deadheading it, that's the key. Homestead verbena will bloom those gorgeous purple blooms, very low growing, spread out. Bath's Pink Dianthus is my favorite variety of the perennial dianthus. It likes drought conditions, good drainage, I should say. It likes really good drainage. And then this is Sherry Jones' garden. I went there in the spring, and I just thought that was so spectacular. So you can see how she's used them in her garden. And that's a Rising Sun Redbud in the background there, and then a clematis in the foreground. And then we have more wildflowers that come on the scene. I have some of the somniferum poppy seeds with me if you want. They need to be planted next month. And then the larkspur, there's the blues and the pinks and the whites, just the beautiful spikes. Again, have to let them go through their ugly period to collect the seeds, or you won't have any next year. So you can scatter them back in your garden once they go to seed, or you can collect them and give them to friends, which every little seed pod probably has 1,000 seeds in it, so you really only need one. Lots to share with friends. So this is Sherry Stanfield's garden with the hardy amaryllis. The St. Joseph's lily is a common name for it. Just profuse red blooms on it, beautiful. And then Byzantine glads, I know that our club has sold those one year. They bloom a little bit later, into April. So just beautiful magenta blooms on it. They will grow probably about 2 feet tall, and they stand up quite nicely. They don't flop around. Then irises, of course, Sylvan, where's Sylvan? Our iris queen here. And then a friend of mine gave me this roof iris, and the roof irises, people used to grow them on their thatched roofs, like in Japan. Excuse me. So cute little, it's got really neat looking iris foliage on it, stays very short, under 1 foot tall. So then in the shade, we've got Japanese maples, Texas gold columbine, which is columbine is a native variegated Solomon seal. I don't have a picture of the foliage in here, but it's really a pretty variegated foliage. Very hard to find that plant, but if you can find it, it's a great shade plant. And then of course the ajuga, which is a nice little ground cover that gives us the purple blooms. And then azaleas, if you can grow them, they need acid soil. Yes, some areas of Grapevine, we've got more acidic soil. I don't have it in my yard. It's just, to me, takes heroic effort. I'm not willing to do it. So, Neil Sperry says you need to dig down 10 inches, mound up 10 inches, and do nothing but pine bark and peat moss in that 20 inches planted in that. And then you need to redo that, because if you're watering with your city water, it's alkaline water, and you just, I don't know. For 2 weeks of blooms, not worth it for me. But foliage color. I love these two combinations with the Japanese maple and the creeping jenny, and then the other combo I use all the time is the Japanese maple and the strawberry begonia. Strawberry geranium is another name for that. Of course, the creeping jenny doesn't bloom. The strawberry begonia will bloom teeny tiny little white blooms. Hard to get even a good picture of them because they're so tiny. But I just love those combinations just for foliage. We don't always have to have blooms. So then, I never call it beard tongue, I always call it pen stem. And the lavender blooms there, great pairing with the Texas gold columbine. It'll grow about 2 feet tall. So then roses, does anybody have roses left? Few people, yeah. So we all know about Rose Rosette. Be on the lookout. I saw some when I was driving in today. I want to have flyers I can just put on people's doors and say, please get rid of those, because we're just spreading the problem around. It's spread by the mite, and you want to look for these symptoms. Everybody, we've talked about that a lot, so just be on the lookout. All right, Virginia Sweet Spire. I thought I lost this in 2011, because this plant does like a little bit of moisture, but it will attract these red admiral butterflies like nothing I've seen before. So it'll grow about 3-4 feet tall or so, but if you can put it in a spot where it gets a little more moisture, that would be better. And I was wandering around my garden the other day, and I found a tiny little scrap of it left. I'm like, it's trying to hang on there. Red dragon persicaria, great plant, roots very easily, gets tiny little white blooms on it later on, but the foliage is what I grow it for. And then of course the lime mound and the Anthony Water spirea, if you need a smaller spirea. Lime mound and gold mound, I can't tell the difference between. They grow only about 2.5, 3 feet wide or so. Great little plants. And then salvias, I'm talking about salvias again. We've got Henry Dulberg and Augusta Dulberg. If you know the story for those two, Greg Grant, he's a plant guy in East Texas. He goes around to abandoned home sites and graveyards looking for plants that are thriving because there's no one there taking care of them. And he found at Henry Dulberg's grave this blue bloomer, and at Augusta, his wife's grave, he found the white bloomer. So he propagated them, got them into the nursery industry, and amazing strong bloomers. They attract bees like nothing else and monarch butterflies, so great plant. But they will grow all of 3.5 feet tall. My trick on those, anytime they get leggy, meaning they start losing their leaves at the bottom and you just have stems, whack them to the ground. I'm telling you, just take your shears and chop them to the ground. Don't have to be nice about it. And they will just whoosh, come right back up and be blooming. Snow Hill Salvia is kind of like the May night. So it only grows about 1 foot tall or so, but just blooms profusely, even through the summertime. Callilophus, very drought-tolerant plant, will bloom like crazy in the spring, very sporadically in the summer, and may rebloom again in the fall. And then Azure Skies Heliotrope, I actually prefer over Verbena. It only has this little lavender bloom, and it's deciduous, so it'll go away in the wintertime but come back every year, but has that same habit as a Verbena where it's low and spreading, and the bees love this plant. All right, just moving into May. Daylilies. I never used to be a big daylily fan, but I am now. There's just so many. I mean, how many hundreds of thousands, literally, varieties do we have? And there's early season, mid-season, and late season blooms. So you can have, daylilies going in your garden lots of months. Hydrangeas. Endless Summer is one of the mophead varieties. They say that they bloom on old and new growth, so you don't have to be so concerned about if you need to cut them. But if you don't need to cut your hydrangeas, it's better. Most of them bloom on old growth, which means last year's growth. If you cut them, they won't bloom this, in the springtime. So try not to cut them. Oak leaf hydrangeas only bloom in white. Alice is my favorite variety, but gets huge, 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. But the blooms on it, they're just enormous. Just love it. And then you get some fall interest with the foliage as well. I have a variety called Lady in Red. So, but they need water. They just need water. My oak leaf does not need as much as the mopheads do. The mopheads, I have a client who calls them drama queens because you could water them every day and they still wilt. So don't water them. If they're wilting in the daytime, don't water them because they're just responding to the heat. If they're wilting the next morning, go ahead and water them. That goes pretty much for any perennial or shrub. So more blooms in the shade. Bear's Breeches gets this big, tall, white spike on it. They do go a little dormant in the summertime, and then they start perking up again when it cools in the fall, but big, large, glossy, dark green leaves on them. Salvia garanetica, or black and blue, will bloom in a lot of shade. I've had growing by my oak leaf hydrangeas, and they still bloom. This one will travel a little bit. That's my only complaint about it. If you put it here, next year it's over there. So, red yucca, extremely drought tolerant. I keep saying I'm just going to start slapping red yucca in at my church garden. I manage my church garden, and anywhere we have something die, I'm just going to put a red yucca there because half the time the sprinklers don't work, and this doesn't need any supplemental water. Russian sage is a great drought tolerant plant. And then gray creeping germander, hard to find this plant, but if you can find it, it's awesome. It needs really, really good drainage, very drought tolerant. It might grow 2 inches tall. Very ground hugging, but has these little lavender blooms on it all summer long. Love, love, love that plant. Gray creeping germander. Pink skullcap, again, small, maybe 6-8 inches tall, will form a little, 1 gallon plant will probably form a mound about 2 feet wide. Great all summer bloomer. Catmint will grow at least 3 to 4 feet wide, but maybe 1.5 feet tall. That's what I use instead of lavender. Lavender doesn't like our humidity, has to have perfect drainage. Catmint's a little bit more forgiving. It wants good drainage, but it will bloom and come back very reliably. And Verbena bonariensis, am I saying that correctly? Very tall verbena, very rigid stems on it. It's very airy, so you can plant it in the middle of your garden and you can just see through it, but I just love it, and the bees love it as well. Purple coneflower. I have trouble growing these in my garden. They tend to get the virus Astor's yellow, so you have to dig them out, throw them away if they get that. What happens is the petals don't form and you have a deformed cone. So if you see that, get rid of the plant. So this was taken at the Master Gardener Resource Connection Garden just spectacular blooms. And then Maggie Ross McNeely, she used to write for the Star-Telegram. She has a beautiful old tiny variety. I don't know exactly what it is, but just beautiful, intense color on it. There's lots of new varieties of those two, with the white and the orange and the little pom-pom doubles. And so if they do great for you, great, give them a try. Jerusalem sage, large, evergreen, perennial. It looks like lamb's ear on steroids that blooms, yellow. Very fuzzy gray foliage, really, really a neat plant. There's two different varieties, Fruticosa and Russelliana. Russelliana has a larger leaf to it, Fruticosa very narrow. But they both have the same kind of blooms, just cool plant. Give that a shot. Pomegranate, there's the regular variety called Wonderful. I have a dwarf variety that only grows about 3 feet tall or so. They have these very intense orange blooms on it, and then in the fall you'll get the colorful fruit on them. Then Madison jasmine. The Confederate jasmines are not cold hardy. If we have a mild winter, they might make it. Madison is supposed to be the most cold hardy variety. I think there's a variety called Mandy as well that has more of a yellow bloom on it, extremely fragrant, but put it in a protected spot. If you put it on the north side, I can guarantee you it's going to die to the ground. I have it on the south side of my house, on my fire, the brick of my fireplace, and I still have had trouble with it. I'll cut it back and it comes back from the ground at least, but if you have a really, really cold winter, it probably won't make it. Just know that going in and put it in a protected spot. Then the amaryllis, this is not the hardy kind, but mine has come back. Again, I have it in a protected spot. This apple blossom is just amazing with the huge blooms like that. Of course, clematis. Doris has this clematis pitcheri. Do you still have that? Doris, do you still have that? Mm-hmm. Tiny little bell-shaped blooms. And then a client of mine has this Ramona variety. I love this variety. Huge blooms on it. Isn't that gorgeous? Oh. Alstroemeria. I was given this by a friend of mine in Colleyville. They don't transplant really well, but if you're willing to let it go through the ugly transplant time, it can make it. Called Peruvian lily. This Inca ice is a really pretty variety. Stiegels in Mansfield or wherever, somewhere way down there south. They are the only place that I know that carries this plant. So, but a lot of times bouquets that you get from the grocery store or whatever, they'll have this plant in there and a very, very long time bloom on it. But I have been growing this in my garden at least 4 years. So it comes back, right? It dies down in the winter time and then comes back. All right, lizard's tail. This is a pond plant, but it's just got such a little cool white bloom on it. And then June, that's just a picture of my front garden showing you a lot of the stuff that we're fixing to talk about. So cannas, of course, we're all familiar with cannas. My favorite varieties are this King Humbert, which is the dark variety, and then Bengal Tiger, which is the cream and green variety. I don't even care if they bloom. I just love the foliage on them. So Cosmos will bloom all summer into the fall. The bees love it. Butterflies too. And then Loosestrife. Morden's pink is a sterile variety. Up north, Loosestrife is an invasive plant. So we don't have that problem here with Morden's pink variety. Tall, pink, spiky blooms on it. Bee balm, the bees love it, and the butterflies do too. This can be a little invasive, but if you just stay on top of it, dig out the sections you don't want every year, it'll be fine. And then it's only really blooms strongly in May or so, or in June, and then it's just done for the season. So have something else. I grow Turk's cap around it, so something else comes up and takes over that spot when the bee balm is not. So this plant, I don't even know how to say that, Eriogonum alenii, little rascals, what I call it. I got this from the plant sale many years ago. I bought 3 of them. I still have one that's alive. And what I read about it said that it likes really, really, really dry, so I put it in my driest spot. I think it could use a tiny bit more water, but it gets these really cool yellow blooms on it, and they stay for a very long time. It only, the foliage itself kind of looks like lamb's ear, but not so fuzzy. It's that gray, large foliage. But the blooms come up about a foot tall, and really cool plant. If we can ever get that again on a plant sale, I would recommend it. Of course, lilies, triumphator lily will grow all of 3.5 feet tall or so, big trumpet-like blooms. They don't bloom a very long time, but when they do, it's just really cool. I have it in the center of my garden, so they stand up above everything. Of course, more daylilies coming on the scene, and then agapanthus. If you can get agapanthus to bloom, all the power to you. I have heard that if you pot bound them, like if you will take and plant them in a black plant pot, sink that in the ground, they like to be root bound and they will bloom better for you. I don't know, this has been at my church garden for 20 years and the thing blooms reliably every year. I do nothing to it and I have never gotten one to bloom in my yard, so I don't know. I can't figure it out. It's blessed there, I guess, at the church. So, all right, pineapple lily, Adele Clayson, if y'all remember her, this plant is very special to me. She gave this plant to me a few years ago, and really cool plant. I have it in a container that actually the bottom of the container fell out, so I just set it in my garden so it actually has soil contact that comes back reliably, and it gets this really cool bloom on it. Big, tall spike on it. The foliage looks a lot like an amaryllis or a tropical giant spider lily. Of course, hardy hibiscus, very large plants. They come back very late, so don't give up on them. But they're going to be all of 4, could be 5 feet, and then Texas Star will grow up to 6 feet tall with the big dinner plate size blooms on it. So reliably hardy, but they just come back later than some. All right, caladiums. We always sell caladiums every year. I mean, what would we do in our shady gardens if we didn't have caladium color? I just absolutely love them. They're so easy, so easy. They just need some water. All right, Vitex, native, large shrub. You can keep it as a shrub, or you can limb it up and make it a tree. They say they bloom all summer, but it's only prolific in this June time period. Then it'll be sporadic. If you want to cut the blooms off, if you've cut it as a shrub and you want to cut the blooms off, you'll get another wave. But if it's a 15-foot tree, probably not happening. So butterfly bush, again, likes to be deadheaded. So there's some newer varieties, something chip, something, can't remember the name of it. It's supposed to be that you don't need to deadhead it, that it'll just keep on blooming because it doesn't set seed. So Gara, again, very drought tolerant. Whirling butterflies is a common name for that. Prolific bloomer in the summertime. It grows about 2 feet tall or so. All right, prickly pear cactus. If you've got a xeric garden and you want this plant, it is awesome. There's a spineless that still has spines. I don't know, they get stuck in my hand. It says they're not there, but they're there. Teeny tiny little hair-like ones, but I just love the yellow blooms on them. All right, July, now we're getting into some tough times in Texas. So summer phlox is when it comes on the scene. Just, we're talking 3 feet tall. The butterflies and the bees absolutely love this plant. Of course, John Fanick is the light-colored one with a dark center. And then Rudbeckia. Gold sturm is kind of the standard. You see that all the time. I have also one called Triloba, grows a little bit taller. The leaves have 3 lobes, hence the name. And it has a little bit smaller bloom, but a taller plant. And again, both bloom prolifically. Both of these plants, I would suggest putting in some afternoon shade. Give them a little break in the summertime. And then crepe myrtles, all different colors except for blue, I guess, and yellow. But there's crepe myrtles that bloom 3 feet tall, 30 feet tall, everything in between. If you've got a spot where you need a 12-footer and you want hot pink, go look for that variety, one called Pink Velour. Great variety, pretty foliage. So let's stop the chop and put the right variety where you want it. If you already have one that's too tall, either get rid of it or live with it. Try not to do this. All right, Rose of Sharon. Mine are blooming prolifically now. We have one at the church called Aphrodite, just in full bloom, but they start blooming earlier. But with this rain, it's just kicked off another wave of blooms on them. Again, you can keep it as a shrub or you can limb it up as a tree. I see a lot of the standards where they have a single trunk and then your little lollipop. Lavender chiffon is that top one over here, and I see them do that with that a lot. Rock rose, again, very drought tolerant. Don't give this too much water. Will bloom all summer long. Then the white bloomer is the Brazilian rock rose. Datura, Jimson weed. My husband said they called it loco weed in West Texas because the cattle ate it and went crazy. But it blooms at night, pollinated by a moth, and very fragrant. I took this picture. I used to have this growing beside my patio. There were 200 blooms on it. I came out my patio. I'm like, what is that sound? It was bees. There were so many bees on it. It was awesome. So it just got too big for that spot. I mean, it's humongous. 8 feet, at least. It's just huge. All right, so colorful, if you have a pond, these are 2 great plants. The pickerel rush attracts these red dragon flies. I just love them. And then the water lilies, of course, there's white and yellow and pink, so all of those different varieties. There are tropical water lilies, so make sure you get hardy varieties. And then candy lily, have y'all ever tried this? I love this plant. It is a cross between a blackberry lily and a Vesper's iris. Never heard of that before, but the foliage, if you can see down at the bottom, it looks like an iris, but it doesn't go all brown sometimes like iris does, and it doesn't get quite as tall. The foliage doesn't get quite as tall as an iris, but then it sends up, in July, it sends up these little orange, dainty, orchid-like blooms. Just love it. And then I guess the blackberry name is it forms these little tiny blackberries on it. So just a really neat plant. Just got that from a friend. I don't even know where she got it. She did get it from a nursery, so they are available. Then rain lilies, there's yellow and white and this pink that was given to me by a friend. And they'll bloom sporadically through the whole summer season. And I'll just walk out in my garden and it's like, oh, it's blooming. So there's really no set time to it. And the rain lilies are usually about 8-10 inches tall, not a big plant. So then lots of other lilies. We've got the crinum lilies. This is out of Nancy's garden, and the black beauty is out of her garden as well. And then the Lycoris squamigera, that's, the red spider lilies. Well, this is the pink version. It blooms in July, where the red ones will bloom in the fall. So I'll show you that later. I had 1 bloom this year, but it was my first, so I was excited. All right, African blood lily. Have y'all ever heard of this? I got this from Stiegel's nursery down in Kennedale or Fort Worth, wherever it is. He carries some plants that are a little on the cold, hardy, fringe, but I have this in a protected spot, and it's just really a cool plant. It's got big, broad foliage on it, but then it sends up this bloom with this big pom-pom of red on it. So it's a bulb. It's a really cool plant. So put it in a protected spot if you're going to try this one. And then tropical giant is my favorite of all time lily. So it will grow all of 3 feet tall and wide, just spectacular foliage. If it never bloomed, I wouldn't care because the foliage is so striking. And then on about July 4th, I think that's one of the names is July 4th lily, it gets this white bloom on it. So just a great, great plant. You rarely see it at nurseries. There's a lady in South Lake that is like my supplier, so she's like my dealer. I just go dig them up from her every year, and then I pass them around. So, and then abelias. I love, love, love abelias. So many different varieties. They bloom all summer. The butterflies love them. The bees love them. Fragrant. Lots of different varieties. And there's, kaleidoscope, the tag says 2 feet, guarantee it's going to be 3 to 4. So it's not as small as they say. I also love to put that one where it's going to get some afternoon protection so it doesn't look so bleached out. But there are varieties like grandiflora that's going to grow 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. Know the variety you put in. Google this stuff before you buy the plant. Just a picture of my front yard in August. So then Blackfoot daisy. It is a little on the fringe of hardiness, but has to have almost desert conditions. So very, very dry, very fragrant, blooms prolifically through the summer. It's just an amazing plant. Even if you have to replant it, I think it's worth it. Zexmania, native, blooms all summer long with the yellow blooms. I love, love, love that plant. It can reseed a little bit, but just pull them out. Give them to your friends. Purple heart. I don't know what I would do without Purple Heart. It's Turk's Cap and Purple Heart, great combo. It can handle sun, shade, drought, water, you name it, does it. I have a small variety that the leaves are maybe 2 inches long on it as opposed to 4 like the large one. It stays more compact, doesn't turn quite as purple, but I still love the variety. It just stays in a tidier, compact, more form. And then, of course, lantanas, all different kinds. This is lantana camera. This is native and perennial. Some of the newer varieties may not be perennial for you, so they bloom. They're worth planting because they attract the butterflies and bloom all summer long and can take the heat. And then Katie's Ruellia, I would caution you, don't plant the tall Ruellia. It will take over your life. So my neighbor gave me 3 seeds one time with a warning, and I'm like, oh, it can't be that bad. It's that bad. It's that bad. But the Katie's stay small. The pink one's called Bonita. They stay very small. Yes, they do pop seeds, but when you dig them up, they're gone. The tall one, when you dig it up, it ain't gone. Trust me. Okay. Society garlic, they say if you plant this near roses, that like if we were to put a clove of garlic in our shoe, we would taste it in our mouth because it's systemic. So they say it's the same in your garden if you'll plant any allium next to roses that it can help. But nothing's going to help rose rosette, so that ain't going to fix it for you. Hyacinth bean vine is an annual vine, blooms the pretty lavender blooms, and then in the fall we get the maroon pods on it. So it's really, really cool plant. And if you want to put a vine somewhere, but you're not really sure, you're not married to it because it goes at the end of the season. All right, chocolate plant. Pam Brock, my best friend, she gave me this plant many years ago. I love, love, love this plant. If you can ever find it, again, Stiegels, they carry these bizarre plants. It is the most amazing plant. It's got really cool chocolate-colored foliage with that silver stripe down the middle, and then it gets even better, and it gets these little violet blooms on it. It comes back very late, though. I usually forget that I even have it, and then in about May is when it comes back, and then it just starts spreading. It transplants extremely easily. I've got to dig some of these up and start spreading them around the club because they are such a great plant. Shade, a little bit of morning sun would be fine. Mine even gets some afternoon sun, but not a full day sun, but some sun throughout the day would be fine. Just amazing little plant. All right, annual color that beats the heat. We've got the Gumfrina, Melampodium, zinnias, vinca. Make sure you get the Cora vinca so they don't get the fungus, and sometimes they still do, so it can be an issue. Catalpa, this is a cross between a desert willow and a catalpa tree. So it is a nice, small ornamental tree. I think we had a 3-gallon tree that I got at the plant sale one year, the fall tree sale. I stuck it over at my church garden, and I think I gave it a bottle of water like this and forgot about it, and it is thriving. Very drought tolerant, tough little tree, gets these really pretty desert willow-like blooms on it. But I think it's not quite so finicky as a desert willow. Desert willow needs a desert. All right, butterfly ginger. Mine has never bloomed. I took this picture in Mobile, Alabama, when I was there this summer. But very fragrant. It has canna-like foliage, so I still grow it for the foliage because it's kind of cool, but I wish mine would bloom. And then I grew this variegated ginger in some pots this year, and it just adds such brightness to a shady spot. Not perennial here. It might come back in a mild winter, but you could protect it over the winter if you want. Yes? Yes. Okay, August, more September. Maybe I should move this to the September. Okay, thank you, Nancy. This was, like I say, in Mobile, so maybe they had more moisture and it bloomed for them a little bit earlier. But again, it may start later and carry over to the next month. But all right, September. Y'all remember 2011? How can we forget the year we had 71 straight days of 100 degrees and no rain all summer? I mean, how did we survive? And this was my garden that year. All those salvias do amazing. I cannot have a sunny garden without salvias. So, all right, it's fall in the south, right? But basically, it's just summer with pumpkins, right? I mean, we're still sweating. We still have mosquitoes. All right, so here's some plants that come on in the fall, the red spider lilies. You know, sometimes these bloom better than other years. This is not my garden because I had one come up this year. So, but the oxblood or the schoolhouse lilies do better for me. They only grow about 6 inches tall. I love to plant them with the Katie's Ruellia because the Katie stays so small, and then they're in their blue, and then the little red comes up above those, and then when the Katie's dies down in the winter, then the foliage of the oxblood comes up. So you have something there all year, and they just work well together. So autumn joy sedum, again, needs really, really good drainage. My problem with it is it'll grow up, and about the time it's going to start blooming, it goes. So Steve Huddleston at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden says, once it's 8 inches tall, if you'll cut it back to 4, then it will put on thicker growth and be able to handle that. So just make sure it's got really good drainage. The bees love it. Garlic chives, I always know I have survived another Texas summer when the garlic chives start blooming because they bloom so late in August into September, and it's like, we've made it again, and the bees love them. Be sure to cut the seed heads off when you start seeing the black seeds form because you'll have it everywhere if you don't, but it's a great little plant. All right, Turk's Cap, Myers Park and Event Center up in McKinney. They supplement with water once a year, not a month, but once a year in August, they water. And that's where this picture was taken. That thing was blooming prolifically, and I thought, why do I even water mine? I mean, they just do amazing. And again, sun, shade, native, attracts the hummingbirds. Can't say enough good about Turk's Cap. Large plant though, give it room to grow, very large. All of 4 feet, 5 feet tall, wide. There's another variety called Big Mama that gets even bigger. Tropical sage, this one is a tender perennial. If we have a really cold winter, it won't come back from the root, but I guarantee you it'll come back from seed, and a lot of times mine will come back from the root as well. So, but mine's just blooming prolifically right now. Again, hummingbirds love red tubular flowers, so love this plant. Passion vine, very large vine, but ooh, those blooms. The Gulf fritillary butterfly needs this plant, so they will probably eat it. Liriope, just a little humble liriope, gets the prettiest little purple blooms on it. Doesn't matter whether this is the variegated variety called silvery sunproof, and I've heard Neil Sperry say it's not silver and it's not sunproof, so I don't know why they call it that. But it does, if you can give this a little afternoon shade, it's a little happier. I've seen it scorch when it's getting unrelenting sun. But I just love the purple blooms on it. I have one called Emerald Goddess, which is just a dark green variety. It's blooming purple right now too, but it'll get about 2 feet tall and wide. And it's a clumping variety, not the spreading variety. Somebody let me know if I'm getting close on time. October, salvias again. We've got the Salvia farinaceae, which Henry Duelberg is one of the Salvia farinaceae. Victoria is one of the common ones. They actually sell it as an annual, but it's perennial here. Salvia gregii is probably my all-time favorite perennial. Native, blooms from March until November. I don't know any bugs that, bother it. The bees, the butterflies, the hummingbirds. It's more shrub form. The trick with gregii is in February, it's going to grow 3 feet tall and wide. If you will cut it down to 6 inches every February, just chop it. It will just stay in a nicer form. It'll be more compact. If you don't trim it every year, it gets really woody and rangy and it'll split. And then in August, if you'll cut it again, not so severely, but at least give it a good haircut in August, it will just put on a flush of blooms. I noticed Main Street and Northwest Highway, they've got a stand of gregii blooming its head off right now. It's just so pretty. And then Mexican bush sage is the Salvia leucantha, large plant, all of 4 feet tall and wide. Monarchs love this plant. Just a beautiful plant. It can be a little cold tender though, so you might want to put it in a protected spot. I cannot grow it. There's my sunny areas in the north, and it dies on me every year, so I grow it at my church garden and appreciate it over there. Salvia darcii will grow all of 4 feet tall, very upright red blooms. Again, hummingbirds love it. American beautyberry for the shady spot in your garden. It can handle some sun. I wouldn't put it in 8 hours of sun, but it can handle a lot. The birds love the berries, and it will grow rather large, at least 4 to 6 feet tall and wide. I have a client in South Lake right now. It's probably 8 feet tall and wide. They've never touched it. It's just spectacular. But you can prune it back in February if you want to keep it smaller, and it'll put on the new growth and berry in the fall. All right, Cenizo, Texas sage. I think they call this like a barometer plant because it'll bloom when we get rain, after rain, before rain. I'm not really sure. But this plant, please don't shear it. Just let it have its natural form and just let it do its thing. If you have to cut it, cut it back in the spring and let it flush back out again to stay compact, because it can get kind of leggy, and it likes really, really hot and dry. The prettiest stand of this I've seen was on 157 in the middle of the road surrounded by gravel. I mean, it just likes hot. So anytime we put it in our gardens where we're giving it water and then we're crowding it with other stuff, it usually looks pretty crummy. So fall aster will bloom its head off very late in the season. This is a plant that will travel a little bit on you, so keep it in bounds. Any perennial, set your boundary. Say, you can live here, and when you get over here, I'm reining you back. So, and give it to your friends, pot it up for the plant sale. It's just a beautiful plant in the fall that will knock your socks off with color. A Copper Canyon daisy. I don't grow this one, but it's a great plant for our area, but because I grow so much Zexmania, which gives me that yellow bloom and a mounding form, I don't need one more of that type of plant. So if you don't have this plant, you want to try it. It has a very, very strong lemony foliage smell, very strong. So you either like it or you don't. But very large plant, probably 4 feet wide, maybe not quite that tall, but very large. So give it some room. And then ornamental grasses, pink muley. It is furniture the whole year, and then in November, wow, I mean, it's just amazing. My new favorite grass is pine muley, not pink muley, but pine muley. Doesn't have any color to it, but stays smaller and has very, very erect inflorescence, I guess they call that. Monarch magnets, Greg's mist flower will attract monarchs like nothing else, but it does travel a little bit, so I would call it very aggressive. I don't know that I would go with invasive, but it's very aggressive, so just know that going in, keep it in bounds. Mexican milkweed, and then the native milkweed, one is chrysavica, one is tuberosa, one has the 3 different colors on the bloom, and one is just the orange, the monarchs. This is their larval and nectar plant. And so you can see the little egg right there. Look, it's just so cool when I go out and see them. And then here's the monarch, and that's what it turns into. And then, of course, we're on the flight path when they're going back to Mexico. So, and then they have the butterfly flutter by in October every year. So that's always fun to release the butterflies for the kids. Mexican fire spike, this again was given to me by a friend in Colleyville. I don't think I've ever seen it at a nursery, so if you ever do, it's a great plant. I grow it in mostly shade. You can give it a little bit of sun, at least in the morning. It grows about 4 feet tall, and mine has not started yet, but shortly it will be putting on these tall red bloom spikes like that. Really big, broad, dark green foliage. It will die back down as soon as we get a freeze, and then I'll mulch it with some leaves because it can be a little tender. I have had it for probably 4 or 5 years and had no issues with it. So I just wish I could find it at nurseries, but it propagates really easily, so I should propagate some for y'all. All right, autumn crocus or Sternbergia lutea. This is, I think, Neil Sperry's favorite little fall bulb. So when you put these plants in, you plant them in the spring, and it's like, what do I have growing here in the fall? So it's not covered up. So you got to really think through when you plant your bulbs. So, but only about 6 inches tall, cute little bulb, and this gorgeous little yellow bloom on it. And this is just a picture of my front yard with all the stuff I think I just got done talking about. And then November, getting into later, of course the mums start coming on, lots of different varieties. I call that, this one down here, I call it my Aggie mum because it's maroon and my husband's an Aggie. So I got it, and I got it from my Aggie neighbor. So, but lots of different varieties of mums. I would just, my one tip on mums, if you're going to use them for annuals, buy them in bud, not bloom. So look at the color you want and buy the one next to it that's in bud, because once you put them in your container in full bloom, they're going to stall out on you, and those blooms are going to go south. So if you buy them in bud, you get the full benefit of all of their blooms. Leopard plant is my go-to plant for shade. I rarely use hostas anymore. I mean, I grew up in Wisconsin where hostas are amazing. I mean, they're like shrubs, but they just don't do as well down here because of the heat and the slugs and the snails. And I do hostas in pots because the slugs don't seem to get to them, and it's colder in a pot, so they seem to enjoy that better. But leopard plants, that's what I use. I have just a solid green variety. I have some variegated varieties. There's a giant variety, but they all bloom these really cool yellow blooms on them in November when it's starting, certain things are starting to go dormant and nothing else is going on. You get these cheery yellow blooms. And if you will leave those to go to seed, they have almost like a little thistle looking bloom on them, or a seed head on them, and it looks really cool if we get some snow on them. But I then gather those and just spread them around in my garden. I have more little baby leopard plants, so don't cut those blooms off when they go to seed. Let them, propagate in your garden. And then Salvia madrensis or forsythia sage, very large, very dark green foliage, huge square stems as big as my thumb. Salvias all have square stems, but this has a really big one and huge, all of 4.5 feet tall, but blooms very late. All right, Mexican marigold will bloom in the fall. I love to pair it with either fall aster or Mexican bush sage because I like the yellow in the bloom. My tip on this is if you will, in about July, cut it in half height-wise. It'll form stronger stems because it blooms so prolifically. If you just let it grow tall, it'll flop over from the weight of the bloom. So be sure to cut it back about July 4th. A lot of fall plants if you will do that with the Mexican bush sage as well. This is also Texas tarragon, so if you cook with tarragon, you can use this. It smells like licorice. I like to plant it where can walk by and just grab the foliage, and it just smells so good. All right, fall foliage, sumac. Probably don't have this in our gardens, but you're going to see it along the roadside sometimes in woody areas. Very intense burgundy foliage. Doesn't like nice soil. So if you do plant it, don't give it some nice cushy soil. And then oak leaf hydrangea, we saw that blooming in May, and then in November we get this beautiful foliage to go along with that plant. So lots of interest with oak leaf hydrangea. And then the sumac has that seed. When I did this program, I was taking pictures in the fall of 2013, and I think that's the prettiest fall we have had. I don't think we've had one like it since. I got amazing fall color tree pictures that year, so thankfully. Chinese pistache, great tree. I prefer the male. The females have the berries. That can be a little bit messy, but some people like to see the berries. I just prefer the males. But intense fall color with the oranges and the yellows and the reds. And a nice smaller tree, about 40 feet or so at maturity. And then the Shumard red oak does not like wet feet, so make sure it has good drainage, but very large tree. Don't plant it under the high wires. Dark red foliage, very large, 60 feet at least. All right, Shantung maple. I had shown you the early blooms on it, and I think in March it blooms. And so the regular Shantung has the yellow foliage. The fire dragon has the red foliage. They will both grow about 30, 35 feet tall. You can get them from Metro Maples in Kennedale. I took some clients there one time, and they said, "Are we still in Texas? I mean, we're driving and driving and driving, and when you get there, oh my goodness, all the maples, just amazing." And Scott Hubbell's owner, he is so knowledgeable and just such a great guy. They're only open to the public on Saturdays, 8 to 2. So, but he will, if you make an appointment with him, you can go down at another time. He just needs to know you're coming. Ginkgo, very, very slow growing, but large tree, but this intense yellow fall color. And then crepe myrtles, they really have some nice fall color to them, so don't count them out once the blooms are gone. This is Natchez, which is a 30-foot variety. Some of you are probably seeing the scale on them where you have the white insect, and then their excrement is sooty mold, is honeydew, which is sticky, and then the sooty mold grows in that, so you have the black, and then you have the white, and they look horrible. It won't kill your tree, it just looks really bad. So A&M's recommendation is to put imidacloprid. This is, and this is a brand, Bayer. It's a big old bad chemical, so don't, just put it wholesale on your yard. Treat a tree if you have to. But it's a systemic, so you put it on the soil, you water it in, the tree takes it up. So it will kill bees, so be careful. And the toxicity of the bloom as opposed to the root, is it toxic enough to kill the bee out here after it's done all that? I don't know. You can do some research on that, but it will take care of the problem for a year or two. So, and it really cleans it up. But if you see this, do not treat, because this is a twice-stabbed ladybug that will clean this tree up too. And anytime we can let nature work together, let's do that. So this is the twice-stabbed. Most ladybugs, they're red with the black dots. This is black with 2 red dots. And that is the leftover pupal cases where it's metamorphosized to come out of that, over here. So if you see that on your crepe myrtle, just let it be. Nature will take care of itself. Okay, back to trees. Texas ash, a beautiful yellow fall color on those. Cedar elm, tinier leaf. They will reseed everywhere, but it is a great tree for Texas. Red maples. I'm good friends with an arborist, and she says, that these will be stressed. I've seen some scorching on them when we have a really dry and hot summer. So just know that going in. If you have a yard that's got a bunch of other big trees and it's maybe going to get some afternoon shade and you can give it a little more water, it may do better for you. But out in an area in a new neighborhood where it's got no protection anywhere, you could have some scorching on it. So, but it's gorgeous. And so beauty's only skin deep on these guys, so don't plant them. They looked good that year, but they're not great trees. The American elm, I'm happy for my American elm, but I would not plant another one. And of course, the Bradford pears, everybody knows their story, and then a sugar maple. My neighbor brought one from Colorado, and it's doing all right, but probably not the best tree for our area. So December, we're getting there. Japanese maples, this is my backyard. I have 24 maples. I love when they bloom, and hopefully we'll have a good year this year. Some years are better than others. So just all the colorful foliage on those. And then ornamental grasses will give you some color in the fall as well. This is Adagio, one of my favorite grasses. Camellias need acid soil. I gotta really scream through this. Nandinas, we all know their color. Aurelia will bloom in the winter. And then pansies and kale. And then if you have a brown thumb, you can try some of these things. And you can also add color with garden elements as well. So, thank you.